Two versions of the Little Bighorn. Version 1. The freaks arrived, but Custer uttered no exclamation. They were from the circus. Custer took in all the surroundings, even though his attack had been contested by the arrival of a booking agent known as the famous Cody's. The Sioux were making a slight burning noise, debarred as persons liable to bear a charmed life. A bullet grazed Custer's flesh. In spite of all, he seemed to change his mind. Here on the Little Bighorn at last was his moment. Saying goodbye, he gave a man with a brain like a cash register as a gift to his Crow scouts. Lonesome Charlie, one of Custer's actors, was scrutinizing a distant point of land where a giantess and an armless man were staging a show for the Lakota. Aroused to action, immediately the order was given to the insane sharpshooters. Meanwhile, it was a gallop of nearly 3 miles to the stage after leaving Major Reno's asylum. Custer and a boy in the Minneconjou orchestra pit paid no heed to the audience's dismay. It was mischief all the way as his squadron leaped after the impulsive Custer. Passing over the crown of brush and rock, they made out the general. They leaped over the footlights, all the brave squadron, like trained seals. Not to continue is impossible, shouted Custer. His act was repeated by his men on their expected pedestals. Custer grew excessively nervous for the first time since changing into his costume. His troop wended its way around him, ugly-looking and determined, dropping horses about the orchestra floor. Custer saw someone mounted on a white horse dash up the bluffs, and his face expressed evident displeasure. The horse's colored markings indicated that the young fellow was Crazy Horse. Women screamed and went out of their perceptible minds. But soon, backstage, the Cheyenne stagehands had caused a panic among the Bluecoats. Only the combined efforts of the song plugger, Werner Hicks, and the ticket seller, Jimmy Flynn, restrained Custer. Just then, Custer leaped headfirst in front of the curtain and sang a stanza of "Mason, my boy, are you here?" There was an enforced wait, so Chief Gall, manager backstage, explained, as Custer's unexpected song had upset the drummer's paraphernalia, which tumbled into the Little Bighorn, which ran noisily on its return journey. Then Custer shouted, pushing his way out in front of the next act, a Hunk Papa war dance. What ensued could not be invented. This cacophony behind the curtain brought confusion on the audience, and then the curtain rose on Custer. One headless chicken later, Custer finished his final number. Version 2. And they made their way up a rock, getting around into the village. He wanted confusion. Wounds counted as nothing, and forward came the one word, a death bullet that was foretold. Between Custer and the river there was a mass of Indians. Many agree on this point. I told it bad. The Indians seemed to see such a small and all the time coming force without getting into it. He headed toward the bluffs. The cavalry rushed to know why that way, inquired if this was the plan, hoping to come out on the ridges, and the Indians were everywhere any soldiers could come out. As a single man, they said that I had seen mischief. The Indians now charged twice, but supposed that some terrible error had been made between the hollows and the ravines. Custer and his command were drawn away while others crossed the ford and rode their horses in from the fight, but went ahead around his front, and when the horses got to keeping abreast of him, death became his manifest destiny. Another moment, and the stream farther down and hills soon came up to the east of him, passing, and still the little band floated in the wind. So Custer and the Indians decided what might be, and that was done on the battlefield as opponents swelled, as those horses did not stop to rear. Custer was following as long as a man could follow him. Passing over the crown down toward where the gallant little command was complete, his fellow officers saw the amount of firing that the Indians would do with shouts of, "My heavens!" "And the general's shot," shouted a soldier close to dead, until the top of the ridge was reached, and then they afterward heard that one man all right to the end, in those clear eyes. No soldiers left, only gray horses surrounded by a struggling, yelling hither and thither like a river. Battle was everywhere, and then the heights came down to the village and was killed, as death already showed itself to the soldiers and against them. He realized that he would never suppose Indians in such large numbers. Some crossed as he was last seen coming out of his saddle. These men were said to keep his eyes on a July day from every tortured bush. He then laughed, and thick as blackberries, as fast as they could, they rode on. The bighorn ran noisily over his former self that could not drive them away, shooting as they passed along. Like a feather floating on the water, we did not know Custer. Custer was reeling, dead or alive. Their horses were taken, and guns fired across the trail, marking his divided troop. A crowd of the dead pushed at the mercy of the Indians, had any rode his horse into them. The Indians and soldiers became mingled, and riding over those who would at this dread moment not get out of their way, their lips pressed firmly together. So soldiers were not taken alive, and in overwhelming numbers lay down dead. They could not attack the foot of the bluffs, a force of soldiers so furious. Every second the truth of numbers possessed the spirit that followed on after Custer. Men on foot, however, were in appearance ugly-looking and determined for the slaughter pen. Men came upon the scene of action, went on, trampling down soldiers who had the good luck to die first. It was the river into the empty village, quiet now and undisturbed, passing and not seeing what those men see forever or never.